Every legendary band has photographs that fans know by heart. The early promo shots, the album covers, the backstage moments that have appeared in magazines for decades. But every once in a while, a photograph surfaces that makes even dedicated fans stop and stare. Not because it's shocking, not because it's controversial, but because it seems impossible that nobody had ever seen it before. In late 2021, something unusual happened in the world of Rush. For 40 years, fans believed they knew nearly everything about the visual history surrounding the band's landmark 1981 album, Moving Pictures. The album wasn't just a commercial success, it became one of the defining releases of progressive rock, featuring classics like Tom Sawyer, Limelight, and Red Barchetta. The cover itself became iconic. But hidden behind that famous artwork was a collection of photographs that supposedly no one outside a very small circle had ever seen. Not in magazines, not in books, not in fan collections, not even online. According to announcements released at the time, photographer Deborah Samuel revealed a series of original outtakes from the Moving Pictures photo shoot. These alternate images had remained unseen for 4 decades before finally being made public. For Rush fans, the discovery felt almost impossible. How could photographs connected to one of the most famous album covers in rock history stay hidden for 40 years? And more importantly, what exactly was in those images? The mystery becomes even stranger when you consider Rush's fan base. This is a community known for preserving everything. Concert tickets, tour programs, backstage passes, rare promotional photos, lost interviews. If a single photograph existed somewhere, chances were high that a collector had already found it. Yet these images appeared to have slipped through every crack for decades. The photographs weren't recently created. They weren't digitally altered. They were taken during the original sessions connected to one of the band's most celebrated eras. And when word began spreading that entirely unseen Rush images had emerged from the archives, fans started asking the same question. To understand why these photographs generated so much excitement, we need to go back to 1981. At the time, Rush was already building a reputation as one of the most ambitious rock bands in the world. The trio, that band, had spent years pushing beyond traditional rock music. Then came Moving Pictures. The album would become Rush's biggest commercial success, reaching multi-platinum status and introducing the band to an even wider audience. Songs like Tom Sawyer became staples of rock radio, while the album itself is still considered one of the defining releases of the progressive rock era. But the album cover was almost as memorable as the music. At first glance, it looks like a simple visual joke. Workers are literally moving pictures from a building. Nearby, people are emotionally moved by the pictures. Behind them, a film crew is recording the entire scene, creating yet another interpretation of the album title. It was clever, complicated, and unmistakably Rush. The cover photograph was created outside the historic in Toronto. Producing the image required careful planning, multiple participants, and a professional photo shoot rather than a quick snapshot. That's important. Because whenever photographers conduct a session like this, they rarely take only one image. Sometimes they shoot dozens, sometimes hundreds. Most are never published. And that's exactly what happened here. The world saw the final cover. The record company selected the image that would appear in stores. Fans bought millions of copies. The remaining photographs quietly disappeared into storage. Years turned into decades. Rush continued making albums, touring the world, and building one of the most loyal fan communities in music. Meanwhile, the unused images from that famous day sat largely forgotten, or at least that's what everyone assumed. The real surprise came when researchers began looking deeper into the archives surrounding Moving Pictures. The newly revealed outtakes showed moments frozen just outside the boundaries of the famous cover image. They offered alternate angles, different compositions, and details fans had never been able to study before. Suddenly, people weren't just looking at an album cover anymore. They were looking behind the curtain, and what they found raised an even more intriguing question. If these photographs survived unnoticed for 40 years, how many other pieces of Rush history might still be hiding in private collections, filing cabinets, and forgotten archives? The answer would lead fans into a world where some of the band's most valuable historical artifacts were preserved not by museums or record labels, but by individuals who quietly held onto them for decades. As fans examined the newly released photographs, something unexpected happened. The images weren't valuable simply because they were old. They were valuable because they changed the way people viewed a familiar moment in Rush history. Most album covers become frozen in time. Fans see the final version so often that they forget an entire creative process existed behind it. The rejected ideas, alternate poses, and unused frames usually remain hidden forever. But these outtakes revealed that the famous moving pictures cover was only one small piece of a much larger photo session. For longtime collectors, this was fascinating. Every alternate image acted like a missing puzzle piece. Details that had once existed just outside the frame suddenly became visible. Background elements appeared that fans had never noticed before. Different arrangements of people and props showed how the photographer and creative team experimented before selecting the final image. In a sense, fans were witnessing history unfold in reverse. Instead of seeing the finished masterpiece first and stopping there, they could now trace the decisions that led to it. But the deeper people looked, the more surprising another fact became. The photographs had never really been lost. They had existed all along, somewhere. That realization sparked a new mystery. If the images survived, why had they remained unseen for so long? The answer appears to be much less dramatic than conspiracy theories suggested. Before the digital era, photographers often stored negatives, contact sheets, and unused prints in personal archives. Unless there was a specific reason to revisit them, those materials could sit untouched for years. In some cases, decades passed before anyone recognized their historical value. What seemed impossible was actually the result of simple circumstances. The photos were preserved. They just weren't public. Yet that explanation didn't reduce the excitement. In many ways, it made the discovery even more remarkable. Think about it. The world changed completely between 1981 and 2021. Rush released more albums. The music industry transformed from vinyl to CDs to streaming. Generations of fans discovered the band, and through all of those changes, these images remained hidden in an archive, waiting to be seen. Then came another emotional layer to the story. By the time the photographs emerged, Rush itself had changed forever. The death of 2020 marked the end of an era. The band's active journey had effectively concluded, making every newly uncovered artifact feel more meaningful to fans. These weren't just old photographs anymore. They had become windows into a moment when all three members stood together at the height of one of the most important periods in their career. And that emotional connection transformed what could have been a simple archival release into something much larger. For many fans, the photos felt less like discoveries. They felt like messages arriving from another time. But there was still one final question that lingered. Why do certain images capture our imagination so powerfully, even when we've seen the subject thousands of times before? The reason these photographs resonated so deeply has less to do with cameras and more to do with memory. Every fan builds a personal relationship with a band's history. Over time, certain images become permanent fixtures: an album cover hanging on a bedroom wall, a concert poster framed in an office, a photograph printed in a magazine and saved for decades. Eventually, those images stop feeling like photographs. They become landmarks. That's exactly what happened with moving pictures. For more than 40 years, fans believed they knew that scene completely. The famous cover had been examined millions of times. Every detail seemed familiar. Then, suddenly, new images appeared, not from a different era, not from a different tour, from the exact same moment. It was as if someone discovered additional frames from a famous movie scene that everyone thought had been fully documented. The effect was surprisingly powerful. Fans found themselves studying tiny details. They compared positions, expressions, and backgrounds. Some noticed elements that never made it into the final cover. Others became fascinated by how much work went into creating a single photograph. The newly revealed images transformed a static piece of history into a living event. For a brief moment, 1981 didn't feel so distant anymore. And there was another reason these photos mattered. Rush has always attracted listeners who appreciate craftsmanship. The band's music was built on precision, creativity, and attention to detail. Albums weren't assembled carelessly. Songs weren't written casually. Everything was intentional. the photographs reflected that same philosophy. What appeared effortless on the finished album cover was actually the result of planning, experimentation, and artistic decision-making. The outtakes exposed that process in a way fans had never seen before. Ironically, the images became famous because they weren't famous. Their rarity created a sense of discovery that is increasingly uncommon in the internet age. Today, information spreads instantly. Photos appear online within seconds. Entire archives can be searched with a few clicks. But these images came from a different world, a world where negatives sat in boxes, a world where historical treasures could remain unseen for generations. A world where a photograph could genuinely surprise people 40 years after it was taken. That's why many fans began referring to them in almost mythical terms. Not because the photos contained anything supernatural, not because they revealed a hidden scandal, but because they represented something many people thought no longer existed, a real, authentic discovery. Yet the most meaningful part of the story wasn't the photographs themselves. It was what happened after they were finally released. By the time fans had finished analyzing the image, something unexpected happened. The discussion shifted. People stopped asking whether the photograph was rare. They stopped debating technical details. Instead, they started talking about what the image made them feel. That's when the photograph became something much bigger than a lost piece of band history. For decades, Rush occupied a unique place in rock music. While many bands built their reputation on controversy, Rush built theirs on consistency, musicianship, and a genuine connection with their audience. Fans often felt like they were growing older alongside the band. The young musicians seen in the 1970s became seasoned veterans in the 1980s. Those veterans became rock legends in the 1990s and 2000s. And through it all, the photographs seemed to tell a complete story. At least, that's what everyone thought. The rediscovered image challenged that assumption. It reminded fans that history is never truly complete. There are always missing pages, always forgotten moments, always stories waiting to be rediscovered. For longtime followers of Rush, that realization carried special significance. After Neil Peart's passing in 2020, many fans began revisiting old interviews, concert recordings, and photographs with a renewed sense of appreciation. Every recovered artifact felt valuable. Every unseen image felt like a gift from another era. The newly revealed photograph offered something especially rare. It wasn't a publicity image that had been viewed thousands of times. It wasn't a familiar poster hanging on bedroom walls for decades. It was something genuinely new. A fresh glimpse into a moment that seemed permanently locked in the past. And that freshness mattered, because it allowed fans to experience a feeling that had become increasingly uncommon. Surprise. Not surprise created by rumors or speculation. Real surprise. The discovery of something authentic, something historical, something nobody expected to see. Many collectors describe that feeling as the closest thing to traveling through time. You look at an image taken more than 40 years ago, and suddenly the distance disappears. The musicians stop being legends for a moment. They become real people standing in front of a camera, unaware that future generations will study every detail of the scene. That's the hidden power of photographs. They preserve ordinary moments that later become extraordinary. The people inside the frame don't know they're creating history. Only those looking back can see it. And perhaps that's why this photograph resonated so strongly throughout the Rush community. Not because it revealed a scandal, not because it exposed a secret, but because it captured something increasingly rare, a completely authentic moment from one of the most important periods in the band's career. Yet one final question remained. After all the analysis, all the discussions, and all the excitement surrounding the image, what is the real lesson behind the Rush photo that supposedly shouldn't exist? The answer may be far more meaningful than anyone expected, and it changes the way we think about music history itself. So, after all the speculation, what was the truth behind the Rush photo that supposedly shouldn't exist? Ironically, the answer is both simple and profound. The photograph was never impossible. It was never a hoax. It was never evidence of a hidden conspiracy or a forgotten chapter in the band's history. Instead, it was something much rarer. It was a genuine piece of the past that had quietly escaped public attention for more than 40 years. And that's what makes the story so fascinating. We often imagine history as a finished puzzle with every piece already in place. We assume that famous events, famous people, and famous photographs have been fully documented. But history doesn't work that way. Even the most studied moments can contain surprises. Even the most famous bands can leave behind unseen evidence of their journey. The rediscovered moving pictures outtakes proved exactly that. They showed that one of the most recognizable visual eras in Rush history still had stories left to tell. Not dramatic stories, not sensational stories, human stories, moments of preparation, moments of patience, moments that existed just before or just after the images everyone already knew. In many ways, those forgotten moments are often the most valuable. The official album cover shows the finished product. The unseen photographs show the process, and sometimes the process tells us more than the final result ever could. For Rush fans, the image became a reminder of why the band's legacy continues to endure, not because of marketing, not because of hype, but because the work itself mattered. The music mattered, the creativity mattered, and the people behind it mattered. Looking at the photograph today, it's impossible not to think about the passage of time. The young musicians standing in that frame could not have known what lay ahead. They couldn't have predicted the sold-out tours, the awards, the influence, or the generations of fans who would discover their music. They certainly couldn't have imagined that an unused photograph from a 1981 photo session would become the subject of discussion decades later. Yet here we are, still looking, still analyzing, still finding new meaning in old images. And perhaps that's the greatest lesson of all. The photo shouldn't exist because it was impossible. It shouldn't exist because, by all odds, it could have been forgotten forever. A misplaced negative, a discarded archive, a damaged storage box, any one of those things could have erased it from history. Instead, it survived. And because it survived, it gave fans one more opportunity to connect with a band that has meant so much to so many people. In the end, the real mystery wasn't hidden inside the photograph. The real mystery was how a single image could remain invisible for decades and then suddenly remind thousands of people why they fell in love with Rush in the first place. Sometimes the most extraordinary discoveries aren't new at all. They're old memories waiting patiently to be found.